Hey everyone, welcome back for another segment of Michigan Conservative Roundtable. And I'm going to start off by asking everyone here, where were you and what were you doing in your mid to early 20s? I know where I was. I was in Germany, West Germany, doing surveillance missions along the East German border. So just think back, where were you? Were you partying? Were you doing what? When you were 21, 22, 23, 24. I want to tell you about a 23-year-old officer who became known as the hero of Monongahela. Fall of 1753, Virginia governor sends a 21-year-old major of the Virginia militia into the Ohio Valley. He's to meet with the French. The French are moving in. They have laid claim by right of discovery. British feel they have claim by Indian treaty. In December, our young major meets with the French, and the French will not withdraw. They immediately construct Fort Duquesne. Spring of 1754. Our major is now a lieutenant colonel. He returns to the Ohio Valley with 200 to 300 men. In May, he encounters a small French reconnaissance force led by a Frenchman by the name of Jumonville. He is killed. There are suspicious circumstances involving his death. Not exact recording of what happened, but there are accusations that he was murdered. The young lieutenant colonel hastily and poorly constructs Fort Necessity. The French, looking for revenge, move on the lieutenant colonel and attack him at Fort Necessity. While at Fort Necessity, our lieutenant colonel finds out his regimental commander has died. He is now a colonel. Eventually, the French do defeat the French are able to defeat the British at Fort Necessity, and this defeat proves to be an embarrassing loss for our young lieutenant colonel. The French and Indian War has begun, in part because of the loss of Fort Necessity. A cartoon came out by Benjamin Franklin, the snake cut into 8 pieces, saying join or die. The lieutenant colonel returns to Virginia after the loss at Fort Necessity. Virginia does a reorganization of their militia, and they're forming up a regiment now. They give our lieutenant colonel an option, either reduction in rank or retire. He chooses to retire. The following year, British General Braddock leads a force, along with the Virginia militia, back into the Ohio Valley. He has with him a new aide, the same colonel from the Virginia militia. July 8th, General Braddock sends his young colonel to meet with the French to try and negotiate French withdrawal. The next day, July 9th, is the Battle of Monongahela. The French, with a very large contingent of Indians, attack the British. General Braddock is killed, and virtually every British officer is either killed or wounded, with the exception of our young colonel. This young colonel takes charge of the remaining British force, and he is able to maneuver an orderly retreat, saving the remnants of the force. Upon his survival, word gets back to Virginia, and they start calling him the hero of Monongahela. The term divine providence is being used to explain the miraculous survival of his. A side note, some 15 years later, this same colonel would return to the Ohio Valley, searching out possible business ventures. And while he's surveying the area, an Indian chief hears that he's in the area. The same Indian chief that led the Indians with the French against the British. He arranges a meeting with this gentleman. And in what is described as a peaceful fireside chat, the two discuss the battle, Remember, they were on opposing sides. The Indian chief tells the hero of Monongahela how he and his warriors tried very hard to kill him. He instructed his warriors to kill all British officers first in an effort to put the British unit into disarray. The chief himself tried 17 times to kill the hero of Monongahela, at which point he gave up and told his warriors, "Stop. This man is protected by the Great Spirit." The chief is quoted as saying to the hero of Monongahela, "I have traveled a long and weary path that I might see the young warrior of the great battle. I have come to pay homage to the man who is the particular favorite of heaven and who can never die in battle." After the Battle of Monongahela, our colonel, remember he's like only 23, he returns to Virginia. He is now known the hero of Monongahela. The governor of Virginia, he is reorganizing the Virginia regiment, because military units are always reorganizing, and he makes the hero of Monongahela the commander. And the Virginia regiment would later become known as the Virginia Blues, because they wore a blue coat over what would have looked like a red British uniform. The interesting thing about the Virginia regiment was this was the only professional military unit in the colonial military unit. That is, colonies had their militias, but Virginia had a professionally trained and outfitted military unit, and this is what he commanded. In 1758, that's a military term, correction. In 1758, the British General John Forbes, along with the Virginia regiment and its commander, are able to drive French from the Ohio Valley. And where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers meet, Fort Pitt is built. The beginnings of the city we now know as Pittsburgh. At the end of the French and Indian War, at the age of 27, the hero of Monongahela retires to civilian life. 27. I was still in the Army at 27. He marries a wealthy widow, takes control of a tobacco plantation, effectively becoming a CEO. He envisions westward business ventures. That's why he was kind of going back there sometime later to survey the area. But England is beginning to restrict movement to the west, and that irritates him. England doesn't want to disrupt the fur trade industry. He's also forced to resupply his company from England, from English companies, with English material at the English price. That irritates him. He begins to set up his own shops and resupplies himself in any way he's able to, and so begins his personal revolt against British tyranny. 1765, the Stamp Act comes out. He, along with other colonials, resent the fact that they're treated as second-class citizens of England. In the fall of 1774, we have the First Continental Congress. Virginia chooses the hero of Monongahela to be one of its representatives. He appears, and he wears his Virginia regiment full uniform. One historian that I was reading theorized that was his way of saying to everyone, "I'm ready to get it on." Okay? Following year, we have the Second Continental Congress. The decision is made, we need to get ourselves an army. And at the behest of John Adams, June 15th, 1775, the hero of Monongahela, and if you haven't guessed his name by now, George Washington. The hero of Monongahela, George Washington, is chosen to be the general of the Continental Army. We know how the story goes from there. Colonies win their independence. September 3rd, 1783, treaty signed with Britain. That following December, George Washington, the hero of Monongahela, surrenders his sword to the United States Congress and a second time retires to civilian life. But this country still needs the hero of Monongahela. 1789, he becomes our country's first president. Does 2 terms. And towards the end of his second term, a man who could have made himself king, dictator, whatever you want to call it, tells the young country of the United States, you need to elect another president. He again retires to civilian life. And I personally find his abilities to, on his own volition, to relinquish power, that is what sets him apart. That is what makes him one of our greatest founding fathers. And I would just ask everyone, next time you go to the store, and assuming you can find something for $1 or less, as you go to make your purchase, take a good look at the dollar bill and see what a real hero looks like. The hero of Monongahela. I hope you've enjoyed this segment. And as we say here on the Michigan Conservative Roundtable, be safe, watch your six, and don't tread on me.